I have a mixed view of Elon. He's done fantastic work, but the Doge cuts to the foreign aid were tragic, and um, that led to a lot of deaths.
And you think directly these cuts, the actions of Doge, has killed children?
Absolutely.
You've brought out your annual report, and it begins with quite an arresting fact that for the first year, child deaths are going to go up, you think, rather than down. I had a look, and I think this might be the first time since Mao's famine. What's going on? Why are we reversing?
Well, since the turn of the century, we've reduced childhood death at record levels, getting all the way down from nearly 10 million to under 5 million. So that's kind of a miracle. And there are many reasons for it, but donor generosity and providing vaccines to all the world's children, both some that had been in rich countries and some new ones that were created. That's the biggest single reason we had all of those reductions. This year, we had aid cuts from almost all of the rich countries, including a rather abrupt and chaotic set of cuts coming from the United States. And so we raised less money for Gavi to buy vaccines for the world's children. The African countries, which is the continent where over 100% of this increase is taking place, they're very indebted and spending more on interest than they are on even their healthcare system. And so a number of factors came together, but the biggest one was the set of aid cuts.
Have you communicated that to world leaders? Have you spoken to Donald Trump?
Yes, I talk to Donald Trump, and I'm optimistic that between the Congress's commitment to these areas and President Trump himself, that we'll get most of this aid money to come back into place. And in fact, we did see a significant continued commitment to Global Fund recently from the United States. But a lot of it's still up in the air. Will it be a modest cut or the almost 50% cut that we've seen this year?
And can you explain with examples what this means? Where are these extra deaths coming from? What is not happening that would be happening otherwise?
Well, a good example is that one that's U.S. related is that they were funding the surveillance to find people with tuberculosis in Nigeria. And it was a fantastic effort that was reducing TB deaths by over 20,000 a year. And now all of that has come to an end. And so TB deaths have gone back up, and those health workers have all been laid off. Another example is Gavi. Gavi raises money every 5 years, and in June in Brussels, we raised 25% less than we'd raised 5 years ago, part of which is that the U.S., that had been one of the top 4 donors, cut their contribution to zero. And so that just means we won't be able to buy as many vaccines for the world's children.
You spoke at the time of these cuts. You say you hope that Donald Trump will reverse these. You spoke about Elon Musk and his role in this, and you weren't completely complimentary. Has your view on him changed? Have you spoken to him?
I haven't spoken to him about these things. I mean, I have a mixed view of Elon. He's done fantastic work, but the Doge cuts to the foreign aid were tragic, and that led to a lot of deaths.
And you think directly these cuts, the actions of Doge, has killed children?
Absolutely. I mean, just take the example where they did a string search for Gaza and said to the world that money was being spent on condoms for Hamas, when in fact it was a province in Mozambique that was preventing mothers from giving HIV to their babies. They cut that money off, and those mothers did give HIV to those babies, and those babies died.
Do you think this is a temporary change to the world, or are we seeing a shift in how money is spent and how rich countries interact with poorer ones?
That's a good question. The portion of the budget that we're talking about here in most cases is only about 1%. Even in the most generous cases like Sweden and Norway, you're talking about 2% of the budget. And so I think if voters knew how small this is, say for the UK to go back from 0.3% of GDP to 0.5%, and how effective the money is, they would be very supportive. That they wouldn't say that in times of tight budgets that they should disproportionately cut the money that saves millions of children's lives. But getting the word out on that when it's far away and there's a lot of things going on. What about various right-wing parties? Are they willing to be sympathetic about children's deaths? It's a challenge that, over the next 20 years, I'll do my best to spread the word, because when people really know what's going on, they're very supportive.
So over the next 20 years, so you're, I believe, turning 70 this year. So you're anticipating, you've put an end date on Bill Gates as 90. What happens then? Have you spent all your money? What have you achieved? What does success look like?
Yeah, I made a commitment this year as part of the 25th anniversary of the Gates Foundation that all of my remaining wealth, which is a bit over 200 billion, would be spent through the Gates Foundation, and that all of it would be spent during the next 20 years. And, so during that time, we hope to empower these countries to grow their economy and become self-sufficient, and to reduce deaths, ideally cut them in half again, and get rid of a lot of diseases like polio in the near term and malaria in the sometime during the 20 years.
And if you haven't, will you consider it a failure? I mean, something like polio, we've been close to eradication for a really long time, but there's a big difference between close to and done.
No, absolutely. I'm very committed to polio. It has, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, proven to be very difficult. We, are constantly coming up with new ways to succeed, even in tumultuous places. But yeah, that we're committed to that goal, to be a huge failure, not to make it the second disease after smallpox to be completely eradicated.
And if it hasn't been, why will it be?
It'll either be that the donors turned away and didn't support the billion per year that effort requires, or that unrest and turmoil meant that getting that polio vaccine, which is just a few drops, it's called the oral polio vaccine, that we weren't able to get out and get the coverage level of over 90% we need to bring the disease to an end.
Do you ever think at the age of 70 that maybe you don't want to become an expert on neonatal mortality and the transmission dynamics of the polio vaccine, and actually a yacht would be a very pleasant thing?
Well, I love my work. I don't work as hard as I did in my 20s. I was truly monomaniacal in my 20s, didn't believe in weekends or vacations. And so, I'm not in that mode, but, I find the work with the incredible people at the foundation and the partners we have, getting out in Africa and seeing the bed nets, saving lives, talking to the scientists working on things like an HIV cure. I love doing that. And, I hope I can keep doing it for many years to come. But independent of that, all the wealth is set up to be spent through the foundation for these causes.
And what happens when you're 90 and it turns out you're still fit and going, and you've suddenly got no money? Do you have retirement plans? Will you have a house to live in?
Oh yeah, no, I will keep a modest percentage, but in absolute, a very very generous amount of money, so that in no way, am I making some great personal sacrifice here. I've been able to be generous to my children and take care of my needs with a very small part of the fortune.
You recently suggested to some controversy ahead of the climate talks in Brazil that we needed to change our attitude to what we consider success in climate and maybe focus less on reducing temperature. A lot of people were quite, I think, shocked, and some were quite disappointed. Can you explain your rationale?
Well, to be clear, I believe, the biggest funder of climate, both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And I'm the biggest funder of global health and the biggest funder of trying to encourage rich governments to give more resources to all three of these activities. I believe that because of innovation, we will make progress on these, even though we won't achieve the 1.5 degrees or even the 2 degrees. And so we will have to have some adaptation. I am saying that at a time when we have very limited money, we've had dramatic cuts, like the UK aid budget from 0.7% of GDP to 0.3%, that we have to prioritize. And when you decide, which of these things are the highest priority, I'd say human welfare ought to be, the ultimate metric. And so when we're cutting the money for vaccines, that's tragic. We've got to make sure in every category the money is the very highest impact thing it can be. And the climate movement is not as mature at understanding the impact of spending as, say, global health is.
I've been speaking to people in global health, and they say that one of their worries is about what happens after the 20 years. They say you're now so big and have stepped into so much of the research funding market, and they don't see what's coming next. Do you worry about this, and do you think there are any other billionaires who are going to follow?
Well, there are people like Chris Hahn and Warren Buffett, Dustin Musk. There's a ton of incredibly generous people who are in this global health effort with me. And yes, I do think a lot more wealthy people will get involved in global health. It's so fulfilling, makes such a difference. In no way is that going to make up for these government cuts. The scale of the government cuts is many tens of billions per year, and the philanthropic increase will not be anywhere near that level.
Have you spoken to the Labour government about this?
Oh, absolutely. I have a great dialogue with the prime minister and the people around the prime minister, and we were kind of stunned at the 0.5% to 0.3% cut. We think that disproportionately cutting the aid budget there. We were sad to see that and think that should be reversed.
Did you try to persuade them not to?
Well, of course. I mean, I'm not a UK voter, so my role is a limited one, which is to do my best to make sure UK voters know the impact that now the UK has less money for saving children's lives, and that means that we're not going to save millions that we could have at the 0.5%.
Were you hopeful that Labour might increase it? And do you think they will now? I mean, you must be watching our political travails and economic problems.
Well, I think it's hard to overstate the pressure on the British budget, where you have an aging society, so pensions and healthcare, you have unbelievable pressure there. And now you have this pressure, including from the United States, to increase defense budgets. And um, I think even in the face of that, spending 1% of the budget, which would be more than the 0.3%, to help the world's poorest makes sense. And, I will say that as they've made cuts, they have prioritized global health. The global health money has been cut less than some of the other aid categories, which I think is wise. But, um, you know, the sooner we could get back to that 0.5%, that'll make a difference for millions of mothers.
Are you positive about the world in the long term, or how are you feeling? What's the sort of state of the planet from Bill Gates?
Well, there's some incredible things going on, not only in global health. I mean, in global health, you know, things like getting rid of malaria or understanding malnutrition and having cheap ways of solving that. But other health things like preventing people from getting Alzheimer's, all of these drugs that prevent obesity and many other conditions. And so, when I look at the innovation pipeline, I'm very, very excited. In order to map that to helping all the people in the world, including the poorest, there are challenges that we have to care for each other. And you look at the polarization, you look at the war in Ukraine or unrest in the Middle East. And then, future challenges. Nuclear weapons have always been scary. Making sure AI is controlled in the right way, avoiding bioterrorism. So there's some footnotes about how well we work with each other and care for each other. But the innovative potential makes me believe that the next 20 years can be fantastic.
You've written a book about the first third of your life, which I enjoyed. Is this a sign you're thinking about your legacy and looking to your past? I mean, do you yearn for a simpler life of coding and pizza and not washing?
Well, I have an incredible life. I get to do exactly the work I want with unbelievable people, and that's not quite as hands on as when I wrote the code by myself in my 20s. But I get to keep learning new things. I'm very involved in advising Microsoft on this AI revolution and seeing what's going on there. And then the foundation will make sure that AI helps the poorest in the world for health and education and even agriculture. Those are three big areas that we're making sure that the latest AI gets applied on behalf of those with the most need.
Do you care about the conspiracy theories about you?
No, I mean, I don't focus on legacy. Obviously, if I cared about legacy, I wouldn't have the foundation go out of existence. The only real legacy you have is really to the people you knew or to the example you set. And, I hope that in philanthropy we have a lot of great examples, so that more of the wealth of the world goes to help the neediest.
Okay, one last question. Why do you think you built up a massive company? You're now giving away all of your money, and you're focusing very much on metrics to do with saving lives. Why do you think there's so many conspiracy theories about you? Why do so many people hate Bill Gates?
Well, a lot of people are very nice overall. Probably more than I deserve. It is kind of tragic that vaccines and an attempt to come up with a oversimplistic explanation of why there was a pandemic, other than the the truth about it, that it's led to some of those strange things. I think that's pretty small numbers, and it's not something I focus on.
Look, thank you very much indeed, Bill. It's a real pleasure, and I hope you enjoy your 70th birthday.
Great to talk to you.